This is an interview with Gordon Higginson from 1981, which is all about mediumship. It is of excellent quality and runs for 58 minutes. In this outstanding interview, Gordon discusses mediumship in depth and how it should be developed and trained. He addresses the qualities needed to be a medium and the pitfalls of egotism and materialism. He talks about many different aspects of mediumship, including clairvoyance, clairaudience, private sittings, demonstrations, automatic writing, trance, and physical mediumship. He also discusses prediction, the difference between psychism and mediumship, and the use of various tools, such as psychometry. Much of this interview formed the basis of Chapter 13 of Gordon Higginson's biography, On the Side of Angels. This is the best interview with Gordon that I have heard, and one of the finest recordings of him in existence, as both the quality and content is excellent. It is extremely valuable for all those interested in mediumship, and is well worth a listen to hear Gordon's expertise on how mediumship should be developed and trained. I do hope you enjoy it.
My name is Dennis Danville, and I'm going to put to Mr. Gordon Higginson a number of very important questions on this subject. I'm sure we shall be very inspired by his answers. My first question, Gordon, is, do you think that mediumship today is of the same standard as it was, say, 50 years ago?
The answer, of course, to that is no, it's not of the same standard. But I don't think it's because we haven't the mediums available. I think it is in the training that the problem arises. I think that in the majority of churches where people go for training, that there is a lack of teachers, people with ability, people that know the subject and know exactly what to do. I think that we have to realize that in the days that have gone by, the olden days, there were lots of born mediums, people that seemed to have this gift, this inherent gift. Today, we don't seem to have those people available.
Gordon, what do you think is the first step in development of mediumship? Where should one start?
Well, I think before people go into developing classes, I think that they should have a course, a study course, where they can be taught the mechanics of mediumship and certainly what they themselves are. I believe that we start off without knowing what we ourselves comprise of, the various vehicles of expression within ourselves, the difference between our physical body, the etheric body, and the many other bodies of which are all together bound by the power of the Spirit. And I think that we need today to take people aside and begin to teach them lessons, give them instruction on how we are made up, what our makeup is, that the spirit world, for example, is around us, that we're living in this, all these worlds now, that we are living in worlds within worlds, and that before they even attempt to go into a class, that they should have a class of study. And then when they've had their class of study and the teacher who is responsible for them believes that they know sufficient to then take them into the next stage, which I believe is the next stage should be a spiritual one, learning how to blend with God.
A link with God.
A link with God.
A link with the Spirit.
A link with the Spirit. And that can be done through periods of meditation, of which then there should be a teacher who has learned about meditation and can take them through that next course. But I think the very first one is that they should have knowledge.
Now, if there are no suitable study classes in the aspiring medium's environment, can he or she obtain knowledge from books?
I think that there are very few books, actually, that I would recommend on training, because most of the books that have been written many years ago, and we've learned a great deal since then. For example, at one period it was believed that the etheric body died with the physical body. We now know today that that is not so. So things have changed since those days, and they must be brought up to date. We are providing pamphlets, or we hope to provide pamphlets in the future, because we realize this very weakness of which you have put your finger on. The weakness that if people, there is no church or no person available of where they're going to go. It is a weakness that we have got to put right, and I'm sure that in the future we will be able to provide books and courses of instruction on this very subject.
And when you say we, Gordon, do you mean a particular organisation?
Yes, I'm talking about the Spiritualist National Union, of course, where I'm the president, because they do have some excellent correspondence courses, of which are available for our members and people who would like to learn. But I think even there we should concentrate a great deal more now on actual development, of which we haven't done in the past, but which we are going to do in the future.
So after the link with the spirit and the meditation, are we then ready to go into a developing class?
I think if we can teach people to become aware of their real self, one of the great problems we have is that people use words that they don't seem to understand. They talk about God and spirit and love, but when you question them, they don't really know what that is all about. If we could only allow people or teach people that they are completely aware that God is spirit, that God is not a form, but a power and an influence for good, that we must blend with God, because mediumship, in my opinion, is a calling. I believe that we cannot develop it properly unless we feel this urge within ourselves, something that wants to send us forward, to make us go forward. And that must be from God, from spirit, and that lies within us. I think before we begin our development, we should look at our spiritual self first.
Do we have to get away to some extent from the mental and intellectual and onto higher levels to do that?
Yes, I think that in the past, for example, what I have found in the life of Jesus, which rather interests me from the point of view of his clear vision, his clear seeing, his perfect knowledge, and his wisdom, was that when he chose his disciples, he was clairvoyant. He saw that they had the potential of mediumship. They were obviously very psychic and had powers. But he knew that he had to work on them and work with them. And what he did was that he didn't develop their gifts as such. He concentrated on knowledge, educating them, providing words for prayer, and all those things that was building them up for their spiritual self, the realization that they were of God. He spoke about the kingdom of heaven. He was in actual fact preparing them so that when the time came for development, they were able to live in a world that was there, but could only be lived in when we had the ability to rise away from this material world onto this higher level where pure spirit and pure love abides. And so therefore, it is before people develop, they should go through this training of being able to understand the spiritual as separate from the material.
Should there be at this stage a certain amount of sorting out of particular gifts or lack of gifts, and deciding on which path to take?
Yes, I believe that in the early stages of development, in fact, in my opinion, when you're introduced in the developing class, I think that there should be a medium available, a medium that has vision, exactly like, if you like Jesus and many of the great seers and prophets of old, who were able to gaze upon people and see. Because there, when we have a group of people that are going to be trained, they've already, before they arrive to us, have some knowledge of what it's all about. Secondly, that they have been going through periods of meditation, which is to bring the spiritual side of their nature uppermost. So that when they come to that first class, the medium really have people there who have set out on a journey of unfoldment, a journey of spiritual awareness. And when we gaze upon them, we are able to see the type of mediumship which could be theirs, whether it is in the mental mediumship, or whether it is in physical mediumship, or whether it's trance, or all these things, I think should come in those early stages. And I think that it's during those early stages that the medium, the person in charge of that class, begins to make mental notes and begins to encourage the person to take the path. Because from then is another sorting out of those that are going to be the actual mediums that will play their parts to those who probably won't be able to get very far.
I suppose honesty is of the essence in judging oneself in these matters.
Yes, I think we have to be very careful with the purpose of many people who want to develop mediumship, if it's for the right purpose. You see, when I was very young, I was a medium, really, because I saw the spirit people from a child. And I listened to voices, I heard them, I heard people speak. I was communicating with people that I didn't believe were passed over. I believed they were very real people, they were real to me. But I had a very wonderful mother who knew that I had this work, and she knew that one day I would play my part. And therefore, she taught me from a very early age that I must be willing to give and not willing to take. That it was a question of developing my work to serve mankind and not putting the material side of life first, but the actual spiritual side of life first. And I think that when we have people, we have to try and see the level by which they are going to work, and whether they are going to take what I call the serving of mankind, so that God can call us to any level, to any standard, to any person of where perhaps the real need is very essential. I think, yes, there has to be a sorting out.
What about the lessons which we have learned from the past? I mean, we have got various books on mediumship, many accurate accounts of mediums of the past. Have we learned anything from their results which we can use today? Or are the conditions now dramatically different?
Well, I think in the first place, of course, that life was different. People lived, families were much more closely linked together, and there was more family life, home life, and there was not the noise and the bustle of which we have today. And I think that the spirit world at that particular time was actually breaking through anyway. They realized the situation that was facing mankind as it is facing today. And they felt there was a need for the presence of the spirit to be made felt. So that I believe that mediums were born in those days to play their part. And therefore you had the material already there. And you had conditions of family unity and people that seemed to be together more than they are today. There was, I think, a greater comradeship and a greater love, and this helped very much. But I don't believe that the circles that they held in those days, we have learned a great deal since then. For example, I don't believe that we should waste time in singing too many hymns. And I certainly don't believe that we should waste time in teaching people to pray in a developing class. I think this should be done in the early stages. I think if we want to talk to God, it is something personal and something private. And I think that we should already be taught, before we go into the developing classes, all these things. Now, in the days that have gone by, they didn't know that. We have learned many lessons since those days, where that when we go into the developing class, all the time that's available should be for the training of our mediumship in being able to use the right vehicle. For example, what we don't understand, what they didn't understand in those days, of which we understand today, is that to be a clairvoyant, you have to develop the power and the means for the vision to come to you. We have to learn that we are receivers. We have to learn the difference between the psychic that deals mostly with mind and sensitivity to communication with separate minds, the blending of minds on other levels of awareness and consciousness. All those things we have had to learn from experience. So therefore we have enormous amount of knowledge and experience behind us, of which today we are now setting about trying to guide people, today's people, for today's conditions.
Would you say that the ascendancy of materialism has in some way depressed spiritual development or development of mediumship?
Yes, I think that materialism as such is very strong, and perhaps stronger today because of the whole world. The whole world is I think, imprisoned within materialism. Spiritualism is really the balance of that. It is dealing with the spiritual side of man's nature. It is training people and teaching people to understand that there are worlds within worlds, that this material world will vanish away, that the body will vanish. The things which are visible are only an illusion of the real truth. The real things are the things which are invisible. And spiritualism, yes, must teach that. Yes, we've lost it because, you see, today's situation is that we are more involved in materialism, in gain. And that's where we have to be very careful in our development, that we are developing people not for gain, but for spiritual service. And there is where I think that the whole problem lies.
You have spoken, Gordon, about clairvoyance. How about clairaudience? Does the same apply?
Yes, I think that clairvoyance, of course, can be used on two levels. You can be a clairvoyant without being a medium. A psychic, for example, can be a clairvoyant, but not necessarily a medium. By mediumship, you see, we are talking about people that are in communication with minds from other dimensions of life. A psychic is only one that becomes sensitive to environment, sensitive to situations that people are involved with, and occasionally being able to find some answers to some of the problems that face people. But when we are dealing with mediumship, we are dealing with contact, first to prove that man is a spiritual being, that the body dies, but the other bodies live on and take their place in these other worlds that are within worlds. clairaudience can only come to people that are really mediums, because they are sounds and vibrations that are coming from higher levels, that are divorced from the material world, of which, as we know it. And where the fallacy is that people have believed in the past that clairaudience heard with their ears, and of course they don't. They believed that years ago because they didn't know any different. But today, because we are clairaudience ourselves, many of us, I have studied my mediumship. My mother, for example, when she realized that I had this gift, decided to make me very aware of it. And she used to put cotton wool in my ears and bound my ears so I couldn't hear any sounds at all. And then she would say, "Now sit quiet and listen to the voices that come, not from this material world, but from higher levels." And I used to have throat problems, a dry throat, for example. I used to drink quite a lot of water. And I began, along with my mother, to realize that when I was clairaudient, it was not coming to my ears at all, but there were sounds that were coming to my voice. So I realized that it was my voice box, as such, that was being used while I was clairaudient. So you see, we've learned something even more today from that. And we realize that it is the throat that is used when we are clairaudient. So that when we are watching, for example, people that are developing in the gift, we have to watch of where the power is building. In other words, where we see light when a person is beginning to tune in to the other world. And if it is that it is around the throat, we know that we have someone that will develop clairaudience. So we realize that they must be trained quite differently from the way in which we will train the others, so that we are helping that particular gift to be developed and used correctly by the person. So you can see how we've learned so much from the past by thinking how our own gifts work. When we come to clairvoyance, for example, there is the clairvoyance that we are able to tell people of things we see in their present situation. But when we make contact with the spirit world, and that we use our mediumship onto the level of clairvoyance, we have vision, a very clear vision, which is able to show us the situation with the person as they are, but also the situation of the person as they will be. We are able to look ahead. We are able to see clearly the way in which a person's life will go. But we have been, in other words, filled with thoughts that have come to us from a much higher level than the physical level or the psychic level, onto the spiritual level. In other words, we have been filled by thoughts from another high dimension of life, and we have then to be trained how to interpret what we have received. That is clairvoyance and clairaudience.
It also means that prediction is then possible.
Oh, of course. But prediction by a medium, yes. By a psychic, I have my doubts. Sometimes you will go to a person that is quite a good psychic, and they will sometimes give you 100% accuracy. But then you can go again, and it's about 20%. It is very spasmodic, in other words. Now, when you go to a medium who is developed to that level of where they're able to move out of this physical existence onto the higher level, yes, everything is written there. The whole of a person's life is written. It's all ahead. Not because God has written it, but because it is known. The whole of everything is known. And when we are spiritually developed onto that level, and we are able to see, yes, it comes in vision. When we receive communication from the spirit world, and they are filling us with knowledge and ideas and thoughts, it all comes as a picture. and we are aware of it. And through experience, we learn how to interpret it.
So the reliability of prediction depends very largely on the level from which the data comes.
Yes, of course. And what is very important is that when one goes to a medium, or when a medium, for example, is demonstrating from the rostrums or platforms in halls or churches, we may see things with people to do with their personal life and be aware of thoughts that are coming to us on that level. But no medium would actually interpret that until they had confirmed that there was some spirit there that meant that you were in contact on a higher level. It's the higher level that is so important, that we are in actual fact in communication with other worlds, other dimensions, where there is truth, rather than things that come to us by impressions. We have to be very careful of those. And I believe that that is why I place such emphasis on development, why I believe it's so important that we do it properly, that why we discard what was done in the past and we start again with all the knowledge we have available, teaching people, preparing them, finding out their gifts and developing them according to what we have experienced. I mean, after all, I've been a medium now for over 50 years and I've learned quite a lot during that period.
Do you think that from the point of view of the medium getting to this certain higher level, there's any difference between having a single sitter opposite him or her as opposed to having a large audience? Does the latter inspire the medium more than a single sitter?
I like both, but I am one of those mediums that when I take a sitting, I like to be prepared for a sitting. I don't like to be rushed into a sitting. Equally, that I don't like to be rushed into taking a public demonstration. But I think that my work is primarily for publicity, for large halls, of which I'm used to them, and for getting across to the public, because I have developed my powers to go now, when I take a large meeting, that within a very short time I can sort of be aware of the spirit world very quickly, because I provide the means whereby they can appear to me. And that means that I have learned how to get over the barrier of what I call the psychic onto the spiritual. And there, all at once, the whole building, the whole of everything is alive, but alive of another world. And I make the bridge whereby the communication can take place. That bridge is what we teach people today, how to bridge from one consciousness to another. Now, when you have a sitter, you have, first of all, to become sensitive to the sitter. But at the same time, there has got to be an enormous amount of love, because you, in a sitting, you must never try to confuse a sitting which is a purely psychic one to a sitting which is purely a spiritual one. Now, it is a spiritual one that I am more involved with. I like to create the conditions whereby there can come to me in vision those from the higher realm. I like to feel the presence of those who have worked with me over the years from the spirit realm, and I know then that my sitting is going to be a successful one, because I know that if I get caught up in things that don't seem to be correct, I can for a moment blend with them who have more knowledge than me and get some of the answers.
I take it then, Gordon, that a good medium should be able to accommodate either a single sitter or quite a large audience.
Yes, indeed. I train all the people that are mediums in my own church always to give private sittings, because I believe it's excellent training for mediumship.
Thank you. Well now, Gordon, should we now pass on to the next path of development, namely psychometry?
Yes. Psychometry, of course, has always interested me because I was trained by my mother as a psychometrist. So therefore, I lean towards psychometry because I found it of tremendous help in training me as a sensitive. Because we realize in the early stages of mediumship that we are sensitive. We have to learn sensitivity so that we become sensitive to vibrations beyond psychometry onto higher levels. And even though we are born mediums, many of us, we still have to go through these various levels so that we come to an understanding. And we are able thus to use our powers accordingly. Psychometry is a gift. To be able to be a good psychometrist means a lot of development. Psychometry, of course, is a history. In other words, it's the person that has handled the article. It is their thoughts and feelings, their ambitions, and the life that they have lived. In fact, it is more or less a character of them. But you see, if you take an article of a person that can be very interesting and you become sensitive to all that or most that has happened, you always start off with psychometry in the development of the gift of psychometry, in being able to touch an article, and you should be able to say whether it's a male or a female. You must start somewhere, so you start with now. You don't start years ago. You must always start with the present. And you build a character of the person or the thing about it. And then as you build that until you have that person or whatever it is firmly in your mind, all about it, then you start to go back into the past. And you don't go straight back. You go gradually back. I remember my mother providing me with an article years ago. It had been brought from Egypt, and it was only a piece of stone. And she asked me first who brought it. Not what it was, but who'd handled it last. And I was able to build the form of a man that had carried it. And I didn't get his name, but I got a very good description of him. And then she said, now will you tell me where he was when he had this particular object? And I was able to see things, and eventually it came to Egypt. I gradually built up the country of Egypt. And then she began to, each time, I took this over a period of several weeks, and gradually, by taking the first part and going right the way back, I no longer had to sort of go through the first things first. I was able, when I handled it, because my knowledge was already correct on what I had seen, I could deal then with the things that I didn't know. So gradually you keep going back. So again, of course, a person that is going to be a good psychometrist should be trained individually, like I was trained in those methods. Yeah. And it is a great help to you, because then when you go into a room, for example, you don't call upon the spirit world to provide your answers. You automatically know. When a person comes as a sitter, you automatically know what it is that they've come about, so you don't have to worry about it. You can then start your work as a medium and deal with the essentials of which mediumship is. But psychometry should be used correctly. It is a gift not to tell you the future. It has nothing to do with the future. It has only to do with the present and the past. And as long as people use it correctly, it is a great advantage. It's a tremendous help. I remember a gentleman some years ago asking me to go and look at some land. He happened to be a friend of our family, and this land was for sale, and he asked me if I would move across it and tell me what I thought. And I said, this is obviously farmland, but I see houses built here. and I can see all kinds of roads coming across it. So he said, oh dear, that isn't what I wanted. I wanted to build buildings that were piggeries and introduce other kinds of things. And so I said, well, yes, I'm sure that will be, but that will not be the way it will be in 10 years from now. In 10 years from now, there will be houses and roads, and this was completely unthought about. And yet 10 years later, this land was bought, and a housing estate was built on it, and roads came across it exactly that I had seen. But my first, when I touched it, was to psychometrize the ground, so that I knew what it was, and then gradually, there was no purpose. What is the future? And I looked beyond, that step beyond, and saw what would happen in years to come. So you see, you use these gifts, and one really helps the other, so that you don't have to fiddle about with finding out what that land's all about. You can look ahead then, because you realize that is it, and it tells you a story. Clairvoyants are able to do that. I wasn't receiving that from the spirit world, but I was using my gift as a clairvoyant.
There are certain reveres which some people use, I think, in connection with psychometry. For example, some use tea leaves, some use cards, some use the palm of the hand.
Yes.
Are they just sort of like crutches to help one through psychometry?
My mother was a very good palmist. Whether she understood the lines or not, I don't know. But she was a clairvoyant, and I'm quite sure that she used the hand merely as to focus for concentration. And in that, she had vision. When you use these gifts, of course, there is you cannot communicate with the spirit world. It is merely a question of trying to find what is to come. In fact, it is really fortune-telling in a way, because you are really looking to the future and to advise people of the good and the bad that's going to be there. I think that these gifts are used really as a means of concentration, and they are used by psychics. They are psychic gifts, not spiritual gifts. You see, I must emphasize the difference between what I call a spiritual gift, which is vision that takes us into other realms, where we are in contact with people from higher levels who communicate with us and to whom we can communicate with them. And but there are these levels, and they do work with the right people, the people that have developed those psychic gifts, and they can use these particular levels. I'm not opposed to them in any way. What I say is that it does not prove spiritualism. It does not prove that there are worlds within worlds. Spiritualism does. And I am more interested in teaching people a way of life, that this world is a wonderful place, but it is only a starting off place to a greater future, where life continues, and that only spiritualism can give it to us. It takes us to the very center of all life, which is God.
Do you think that astrology has any link at all with spiritualism?
Oh, absolutely. I am quite convinced of astrology. I think, again, it's the way we use it. If we use it for merely for fortune-telling or just as a joke, then, of course, that's not correct. But if we use it for its mystic influence and for its real purpose in life, then I can assure you it plays its part extremely well. Yes, it provides for us. I have done many courses of astrology and aura readings, the sensitivity and psychometry, and I have found a very strong relationship between the two. I have been able to look at a person and gradually, by what I have seen, even find the date and the month and the sign of which they've been born. And what I have given to them, I have asked an astrologer to look at their life, and they have more or less given the same thing. So there is a relationship.
Does the pendulum make use of one's own psychic powers?
Yes.
If it's to be any use?
Yes, I think, again, it's not a gift that I am very acquainted with. My mother used a pendulum, and she had very good results with the pendulum. I think, again, that a lot of it can be done through the mind. I'm always a little bit worried about these things, that you can influence things with your own mind. The table, for example, it can be influenced by the person's mind. But nevertheless, in the right hands with the right person, you can get very good information.
And whilst we're on the subject of veers or crutches, what about the much maligned Ouija board?
This always comes up, actually. I've done several radio shows about the Ouija board. Again, of course, that in the past we've had excellent mediums that provided some first-class evidence of information to do with people that had passed over, and information that could only have come from people of the higher dimension. But again, you see, it's if it's used and in the wrong way. It's like everything else. If it's used for the wrong purpose rather than for the right purpose, exactly the same as mediumship. If we don't use mediumship for the right purpose, then we get the wrong results. If we use it for the right purpose, we get the right results. The Ouija board is exactly the same thing. I don't think it should be encouraged only with people that really have a gift for automatic writing or can be taken over by the spirit, very often under a form of trance, that the hand can be used by the spirit. Then I think it will then thus play its part well. But in the wrong hands, I believe it should not be used, because it can be influenced by the mind. A person may be very sincere, but they may have a very strong mind, and as they do, though they say they are not pushing it, unfortunately you do find that very often it's the mind over it. I think the mind benders have proved that to us, that you can do a great deal with the mind, and in the case of the Ouija board, I'm quite sure it's influenced by the person's own mind.
You mentioned a moment ago about automatic writing. Can one be trained for that, or is that purely a gift?
Oh, it's purely a gift. 30 years ago, we had quite a few mediums that had been trained because they had the gift of automatic writing. But today we seem to have very few. There is a difference between a person that is inspired and wants to write things down, which is not automatic writing. Very often you, I'm sure, has a thought and you feel, oh, I must write this down because it's come from somewhere, or you feel sometimes you want to write a poem or something. You see, not automatic writing, because automatic writing is something that comes, you are used only as a vessel.
Yes.
And
as a medium.
As a medium. And what is then happening is that your hand is being used by the spirit,
yes,
and you have no knowledge of what is coming through at all. In other words, it bypasses you, and your hand is used by the spirit to be able to write out their particular message. It's a very wonderful gift, but a gift that needs very special training. And people that have this gift should be trained way from the developing circle with only one or two people at the most to bring that gift out, to find out who is using them for what purpose, and then to follow out the instructions from those on the other side.
Getting now down to brass tacks as to what a medium really is, I presume he or she must be a vessel rather than a manufacturer of anything.
Yes, I like the word vessel. It's not a word that I have used, but it sounds very nice. It's put a very nice thought into my mind. Yes, we have to be very careful that a medium doesn't try to manufacture the spirit world. In other words, to force it through. Many people have said in the past that we call up the dead. We have to be very careful that we don't do that. I think many circles in the past perhaps did do this. They sort of sat with the intention of calling up the dead and manufacturing them, which was the wrong approach. And I think today perhaps a lot of people seem to think that they have to force the spirit world through, which of course is not the case. The idea of a medium is, first of all, we realize that we have to tune in to what is known as the etheric world. The people that come to us are people for sittings or into demonstrations who would like to make contact with someone that's passed over to find out if they live after death. Now, mediumship provides the means for that to take place. But before it takes place, we have to understand what is going to happen. Because if we are to communicate with someone that's not of this world, then surely we have to develop the means or the senses whereby we can communicate with them. So therefore, training of a medium and for a medium is to be able to get away from this dimension of life, which is the material world, and raise their consciousness onto another level of where their senses work on a much lighter frequency, or much quicker frequency rather, where this other world is. And we there make ourselves provide the power which is there, etheric-wise, for us to be able to allow the other world to come to us in vision form. Now, once we have learned how to ascend away from the physical world onto this other dimension, this etheric world, though we are still here, we are able to use our senses wider, expand them onto this other level. And there, as a vessel, a lovely word, we can be filled with the information that they are pouring out to us. In other words, we become receivers. And we are filled. We don't have to have any preconceived ideas, nor do we have to attempt at this point to try and tell the spirit world what to do and what to say. We are merely there to receive. And we are then filled with this. We then have to learn how to put it across so that we are voicing the feelings and the thoughts of those that have come to us. Yes, we are a vessel. And we are receiving, and we have to learn how to put it across as we have received it, so that we become the channel for this information from the higher level. Yes.
Does interpretation then come into it?
Oh, very much so. Because what we have to do is, you see, the problem with mediumship is that we should develop the spiritual aspect all the time. How can you pour out love of a child if you are not a lover of the child? How can you pour out love of an animal if you detest animals? How can you give the feeling of a sister or a brother if you have no love for your sister or brother? The whole thing is that you can only receive what you are capable of understanding. So therefore, when you develop your mediumship, you see how important it is that you develop with the right material. So that when you become this vessel, and there you are, aware of this other world, aware of these people that are there, living, vibrant people, trying to communicate, trying to tell you how lovely it is that someone at last knows that they're alive. And we are there waiting, free, able to capture every living, wonderful, vibrant moment. Then when we have it, we've got to give it as we feel it. So we have to live it. And we have to live in all kinds of conditions. And we've got to be able to understand all levels of consciousness, all levels of mind, so that we're passing on what we have received without anything coming from us, without allowing our own subconscious mind to colour what we are giving. We don't have to jump to conclusions. We have to try and give it as we have received it, but always with love.
Of course, those remarks apply, of course, to a medium who is not in trance. One who is in trance has to be purely a vessel, without interpretation, I presume.
Oh, absolutely. The whole idea of trance is not to have the message, in other words, through a second person. A medium, after all, is the second person. We are learning, of course, as we go along, other things. But with trance, of course, it is the projection of that spirit form, that person that's coming from the higher realm, projecting through the medium, and they want the medium not to interfere, so that they want the medium to go into that unconscious state, which is very difficult, but nevertheless there have been wonderful mediums in the past and today, a few, who can go into this unconscious state, and which is right, so that their personality from the other side comes through, their words come through without interference. Yes, they are then a pure vessel, a vessel whereby only the word of the Spirit is going to come through. But you've got to train them, you see, and that means that they've got to go deeper into this state so they do not interfere, and that they allow themselves to go into the unconscious state so that they can be taken over and that the projection of the Spirit can come through. Their thoughts, their feelings, their words, their ideas come through direct. So that it's a wonderful form of mediumship. I only wish that we had more people that had the gift of trance, because clairvoyance is wonderful for us, but you can well see that the message is always through another person. We are used as a bridge or as a link with those that are providing the message to their loved one, but with trance it is not, it's direct from the Spirit.
And with what we call direct voice mediumship, is that purely trance, or does it link or dovetail in with physical mediumship?
Yes, it does. There are mediums that have provided the direct voice and can be in a normal state, but if you follow their mediumship, of which I have done, you find that in those early stages of development, they were very deep trance mediums. And they had to be to allow these powers and this particular type of gift to function. So the trance mediumship really is the basis of all physical mediumship. And the direct voice, of course, is a magnificent one. It's a wonderful gift. But those that have it have definitely... It doesn't come from themselves. It has to be developed by the link with the spirit helpers on the other side. It's they that do the work. We do very little. We only provide the conditions, but they really do the work. And it is a work that is direct from the spirit world. And we today should be concentrating on these gifts. It's a great pity we don't. It's only because there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of teachers. But I think it is the most wonderful gift, and a gift that's very essential today's situation. Trance mediums are essential. How on earth are we going to have the advice from those greater minds in the spirit world unless we have here available people who will allow these minds to come through and project their knowledge to us? The world needs it more today than ever before. And that is why it is important that mediumship as such, and the key to mediumship is found, so that we encourage people, but encourage them properly. Don't throw them in without knowledge. Don't let them tackle something without they know what they're dealing with. And don't let them come into it without first they've found God and found that all that is coming through must be on a spiritual level and not on a purely psychic level. All these things are necessary, and I believe that if we can really do this, and if we can really put our house in order and make spiritualism really live, then the world will live. We will find that there will come a light upon our earth, that we will fear no future as we fear it today, because we're in safe hands, if we're in the real hands of those in the spirit world.
You were speaking earlier about clairaudience and the locality of the voices. They were not coming into your ears, but somehow into your voice box. Similarly with direct voice, they can either appear to come from the medium's vocal cords, or it can be at a distance, speaking through a trumpet. How is that possible?
Yes, I know this is very amazing, but yet it has a very simple answer. One is, of course, that the etheric voice box of the medium is used along with ectoplasm, and both these two are really brought together by the power of the spirit. You know, I think that we really should have a tape that deals in much greater length with physical mediumship.
Right. Well, in that case, I'll just put my last question to you about the relationship between spiritualism and spirituality, and how one should try to keep them parallel, increase the spirituality at the same time as developing as a medium or as a spiritualist.
Yes. I, as the president of one of the largest spiritualist organizations in the world, have been very concerned by what I call the spirituality, and especially perhaps when we become mediums, because the demand for mediumship today is so great that if we look at it from the material side of it, then it can be quite like a magnet if we're not careful. But if we do, then of course we lose all spiritual growth. I believe that before mediums develop their gifts, that they should be trained through meditation and spiritual awareness first. I feel that development comes last. I think preparation is the important key, because unless we maintain that spiritual standard, which is important, then our work deteriorates as time goes on. And this has been one of the problems with many of our mediums, unfortunately, that they have reached a level and they've never tried to sort of get higher. They've kept to that one level. And then they have merely looked at it from a material point of view rather than from a spiritual one.
Is egotism almost an occupational hazard?
I think in many cases the answer is yes. But I think that we, in the future, are going to try and deal with it by dealing with spiritual growth first and pointing out the person's spiritual purpose in this world and in this life. I would like to say in conclusion that fame and fortune have always been hazards in mediumship. The answer is that we must never lose sight of the virtue of humility.
Well, in all humility, my dear Gordon, may I thank you very much indeed for the wonderful answers you've given to my questions. Thank you very much.